Dear students, welcome to Module 15, Market-Based Valuation. The first problem we want to look at is this one, question 1. So we have information about Sarner Corporation and its competitors. We have to compute the price to net operating assets ratio. So price divided by net operating assets for both MDRX and MCK. Round your answers to 2 decimal places. So for MDRX, so this will be price to net operating assets. So our price to net operating assets. So price is company assumed value. This is the total price, the total value. Divided by our net operating assets. So, and it tells us round your answers to 2 decimal places. So 1.21. Similarly, for MCK, so up to 2 decimal plus 2.50. Use MDRX and MCK as comparables along with the rounded price to net operating assets ratio. From part A, so we have to use these values, price to net operating assets ratio rounded up to 2 decimal places, and then estimate for Sarner its company intrinsic value, its equity intrinsic value, and equity intrinsic value per share. So we have to find out first the average of the 2 rounded ratios. So we have to use the price to net operating assets ratio of both these companies. So we need to take an average of this. So first, average will be 1.21 plus 2.50 divided by 2. So 1.86, rounded 2 decimal place. And then we have to find out the intrinsic value, company intrinsic value. So total value of the company, not only the equity. The second question is equity intrinsic value, second part. And finally, equity intrinsic value per share. So intrinsic value, company intrinsic value is you take this average number and multiply by net operating assets of our company meaning for which we are calculating these values, which is Cerner. So CERN net operating assets is 1,484 million. So which will be 2,760.24, but it says round the intrinsic value and equity intrinsic value to the nearest million. So to the nearest million, it will be 2,760 million. So 2,760. Okay. Now equity intrinsic value. So we need to remember this. I'll write this down here. Your equity intrinsic value is equal to your company intrinsic value less net non-operating obligation. Net non-operating obligations. So equity intrinsic value is equal to 2,760 minus our net non-operating obligation. So this is within parentheses, so that means it is a minus, so minus 1,350. So that basically means plus now equity intrinsic value per share. All we need to do divide this by the number of shares. So this is in million. And our number of shares are also in millions. Value per share to the nearest cent. So it will be 23.88. So that is all about question 1. Now question 2. So what we have to do, we have to compute PB ratio. So PB ratio means, so your PB is equal to price per share. So in other words, market price of equity per share divided by book value of equity per share, or directly market value of equity divided by book value of equity. If we don't have the per share value, we can use the total market value of equity and total book value of equity. So for A, eclipses. So the PB will be, so equity assumed value. So that is our market value of equity. Divided by our book value of equity. So 2 decimal plus 4.34. Similarly, for Mackesson, equity assumed value and book value of equity. $2.39. So we have to use these companies as comparables. So that means our company, which is Center, can be compared with these two other companies, along with rounded PB ratios from part A. So that means we have to calculate the average of these two, and then estimate for Cerner its equity intrinsic value and equity intrinsic value per share. So C, compared to the previous question, this question is not asking for company intrinsic value. It is directly asking for equity intrinsic value, because when we calculate PB ratio, we are using information related to only equity. So let us do that. Our average will be so 3.37, 2 decimal place. And then our equity intrinsic value. So what we have to do, we have to take this average multiplied by our total book value of equity for our company, which is Center, this. And we need million, nearest million. So now just to explain a little further here. So when you calculated the PB ratio, what you calculated was, what you did was you took market value of equity divided by book value of equity. So what PB ratio tells you is, what is the market price for each dollar? What is the market price of equity for each dollar of equity in terms of book value? So in other words, $1 in terms of book value of equity is worth how much in the market now? That is what PB calculates. So when you found out the average PB is 3.37, so that basically means if the book value of equity is $1, that is worth $3.37 in the market. So that is why you take this number, multiply by the total book value of equity. And that gives us the equity intrinsic value. Now, equity intrinsic value per share, it will be just equity intrinsic value and divided by number of shares, which is 80.4. Excuse me. It's 47.45. So that is the end of question 2. Now, question 3. So question 3 is asking us to calculate price to NOPAT ratio. So price to NOPAT, so price divided by NOPAT. So for KLA, so price is, in this case, company assumed value. Okay. So which is for KLA 10,121 and divided by NOPAT. So 23. For Lam Research, so 11.6, sorry, 17.6 for 2 decimal places. Now we have to use both of these, price to NOPAT. So that means we need to calculate the average. And then we have to estimate company intrinsic value, equity intrinsic value, and equity intrinsic value per share. Now here again, like question 1, we are starting with company intrinsic value. Because when we calculated price to NOPAT ratio, our price was the price of the entire company. So let us first calculate average. So average of the price to NOPAT ratio. So it is not asking for the average, but we will need this for the subsequent calculations. Now for company intrinsic value, it will be our average ratio multiplied by our NOPAT for our company. And for the nearest million, 29,313. Equity intrinsic value, remember this formula, equity intrinsic value is equal to company intrinsic value minus net non-operating obligation. So net non-operating obligation. It's a negative. So this minus minus, it will be plus. Equity intrinsic value per share, you just need to divide by the number of shares. Next, question 4. We have to calculate price to net income. So price to net income is your book value of equity divided by net income. So, sorry, I misspoke. Your price to net income is equal to your market value of equity, not book value of equity. Market value of equity divided by net income. I can write it down here. So price to net income is equal to market value of equity divided by net income available to common shareholders. And as price to book ratio, PB ratio, you can calculate this as also market value of equity per share divided by net income per share. So I can write that down too. Sure. So you can use this formula when you have per share values for both market value of equity and net income. If you don't have per share values, you can directly divide market value of equity by total net income. So and here, when I say market value of equity, it basically means equity assumed value. So we have to find out price to net income. So it is also called net income market multiple. So our price, we have to use equity divided by net income. So that is for our KLA. And then for Lam Research, okay. Now we have to use these, calculate average, and then find out equity intrinsic value and equity intrinsic value per share. So our average is and then we can directly calculate equity intrinsic value, because when we calculated price to net income, we used market value of equity in the numerator. So price to net income basically tells us how much is $1 of net income worth in the market for its equity. So when we calculated average and found 18.34, so that basically means $1 of earnings is priced as $18.34 as market value of equity. So our total equity intrinsic value will be 18.34 multiplied by total market value of equity. Total net income. So this is how much $1 of net income is worth, and the total net income is this much. So nearest million, and equity intrinsic value per share, you need to take this number, divide by number of shares. So that's the end of question 4. Now question 5. So let us do this in an Excel, because we have to do the same thing for all these companies. It will be much easier to do it in Excel, but you need to understand how to do it in calculators too, because if this question is on the test, it will not ask you to do these calculations for all the companies. It will ask you to calculate for only one company, and you should be able to do that in your calculator. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to open an Excel file. So, and then I'm going to copy this in the Excel. Okay. Go back. Now, see one thing. These names are in a column, but these names are in a row. So to be able to use the Excel formulas easily, we need them in the same orientation. So this should be in a column, and these should be in row. So what I'm going to do first, I'm going to copy this and then paste here. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to highlight this again, Control C, copies, and then come back in this cell, right click on it. You'll see this symbol or icon. Click on it, so that will transpose it. So it did not, so maybe I need to select this cell, not this cell. So now right click, this, okay? And then I'll delete, highlight this and delete. I have one more thing to delete here. And let me line up these names with these names. I'll highlight these. And then I can move my cursor until I see here, and then I can move here, okay? Go back to the Word document and then copy this now. See, now these are in a column. I need to convert them into a row. So like before, I'm going to, let's say, copy here and paste here. And then again, come back, highlight this, Control C. And then I'm going to click on this cell, right click, transpose. Okay. And then I want to get rid of this. I'll highlight this and this area. On your keyboard, press delete. I want to get rid of this formatting too. So I'll come here in this icon, click on the drop down option, and then highlight or push on no border. Similarly, highlight this area, select no border. Okay. Now, to find out common shares outstanding, I will enter equal sign. So we have market cap. So market cap is just short for market capitalization, which is market value of equity, total market value of equity. And this is the stock price per share. The stock price is the market value of equity per share. So if we know the total market value, and if we know the stock price per share, then we can divide this market value by the stock price per share to find out the number of shares outstanding. And that is what we are going to do. So this market cap divided by stock price, and push enter on your keyboard. Now, if you want to do it in a calculator, So what you will do, 96,763 divided by 171.3. So 564.87. So the question is telling us to calculate to 1 decimal place in millions for common shares outstanding. So 1 decimal. So it should be 564.9. Now, in Excel, we can also use round formula. So again, I can double click on it and bring my cursor here. I can also edit from here if it is easier. For example, I can click on here, write down round, open a parenthesis, and at the end, I want 1 decimal place, a comma 1. Okay. Now, I can come back here and show you the formula again. Now, all we need to do is just pull down this formula, and it will calculate these common shares outstanding for each of these companies. And then all you have to do is just write this number here. Now, similarly, our total book value of equity. So this is our book value per share, and this is the number of shares outstanding we found out. So all we need to do, take the book value per share, multiply by the number of shares outstanding. So book value per share multiplied by number of shares outstanding, hit enter. And this also we want in to the nearest whole number, right? In millions. So what we are going to do, we are going to come back to this formula, use a round formula, and we don't want any decimal. So enter, comma, and 0. And then we are going to just pull this formula down. Okay. So you see, if you double click on it, and then you will see the corresponding formulas cells are selected. Now, trailing 4 quarters EPS. So trailing means immediately preceding, right? So immediately preceding 4 quarters. So immediately preceding 12 month EPS. So we have trailing 4 quarter PE. And what is PE? Price per share divided by earnings per share. I'm going to write this down here for you. So PE is price per share divided by earnings per share, in short, EPS. The earnings per share, in short, is EPS. Excuse me. So now, we have to find out EPS, trailing EPS. I'll enter equal. We have trailing PE, so price divided by EPS. And then we have stock price. So what we need to do, we need to take the price, divide by PE. Okay. So again, why does this work? So you have price per share divided by earnings per share. You have EPS in the denominator. And then when you take price and divide by this ratio, what happens is price cancel each other, and then you are left with earnings per share in the numerator. Again, one more thing to note here, we want this in 2 decimal places. So I'm going to use the round formula at the end, comma 2. And then I can pull down. Finally, trailing 4 quarters ROE. So what is ROE? Return on equity. So that basically means your net income divided by your book value of equity. So enter equal, your net income is this EPS, earnings per share. So your EPS is your net income divided by number of shares. So we found out our net income or per share, earnings per share, whatever you call it. And then we have to divide by book value per share. So again, return on equity. Let me write this down here. So your return, ROE is return on equity, which is your net income divided by book value of equity. So if you know the total net income and total book value of equity, you can calculate it this way. But if you do not know the total, per share figures, then you can take EPS, earnings per share, divided by book value of equity per share, which we just did. And what we have to do, we have to express it in percent. So that basically means we need to convert this in percent. Let me convert this in percent. And then one decimal, okay? So again, I'm going to undo this. This is what we had. To convert it into percent, I come here, click on percent. Now, what I can do for this one, I can just increase decimal 1. And you will have the right numbers. So this is much easier in Excel if you have to do it for a number of companies. Again, you need to know how to do this using your calculator too, because if you are tested on the quiz or exam, you will be asked to do this only for one company or a couple of companies. And you will have to use calculator. You will not have access to Excel spreadsheet. Now, let us move on. Our next question is question 6. Okay. So for question 6, what we have to do, we have to use these 3 companies only as comparables, and we have to estimate equity intrinsic value per share using the PB ratio. Again, how do we calculate PB, or price to book ratio? PB is short for price to book. Market price of equity per share divided by book value of equity per share. So let us calculate that. Actually, it is given to us. All we need to do is calculate the average PB. So average PB for 3 companies, not all of these three companies, THI, which is 7.31 plus Pizza, and then I'm going to copy this. So equity intrinsic value. We need to multiply this by book value. So the book value per share is 28.06. So what we have to do, multiply by 28.06. $278.07 for 2 decimal place. Now we multiplied by only book value per share, not the total book value of equity. What we did when we calculated previously equity intrinsic value. But because we are multiplying by only book value of equity per share, not the total book value of equity, so this will be our equity intrinsic value per share. So this question does not mention this. No, it does actually, equity intrinsic value per share. Okay, so that is actually B. This question starts with B. Now for C, what we have to do, we have to use the same comparables as in part B. So that means these 3 companies, and estimate Pandora's equity intrinsic value per share using PE. So what is PE? Price per share divided by earnings per share. So average PE for these 3 companies . So we have forward PE. 27.88. And equity, excuse me. Excuse me. So equity intrinsic value per share, it will be our average PE multiplied by our forward earnings per share. Now question, so that was question 6 actually. We did question 5 on the Excel. So now question 7 is telling us McDonald's reports total book value 660 million, common shares, the average PB ratio for restaurant company using the industry average PB ratio. So that means this estimate the intrinsic value of McDonald's equity. So question 7. So we have to find out intrinsic value of equity using this average PB. So we'll take the average PB 10.90 multiplied by our so remember PB is price per share divided by book value per share. So we need to multiply by book value. So this is our book value. And this is our number of common shares outstanding. So we need to find out book value per share. So we will take this 660 million divided by 853.36 number of shares, right? So this calculates book value per share. It's 8.43. Now question 8. So reports net income, shares outstanding, industry average PE, intrinsic value. So very similarly, so intrinsic value, so actually we found out intrinsic value of equity per share. I want to write down this. So intrinsic value of equity per share, but now we have to use average PE, which is 26.21 multiplied by, so you're using PE, which is price per share divided by earnings per share. So you need to multiply by the earnings per share. So your total earnings is this much and divided by number of shares. Now, question 9, reverse engineering with the PB ratio. Reverse engineering with the PB ratio. So we have this information. What we have to do for part A, assume that market's expectation of future ROE and discount rate are 10% and 9% respectively. Solve for the implied growth rate. Do not round until your final answer. Okay, so what that basically means is, I'll write down one formula for you here. So your PB, or price to book ratio, is equal to your expected return on equity minus your discount rate, RE, which is one kind of discount rate, cost of equity, divided by your discount rate again, minus G, growth rate. So again, your RE means discount rate, and your G means growth rate. So we have this formula. And we have to assume that our expectation of future ROE is 10%. So we know this. And discount rate is 9%. So we know RE is 9%. And we have to solve for the growth rate, which is G. So we also need to know PB then. If we know all variables, if we know the values of all variables except for one, we can calculate that or find the value of that missing variable, right? So the PV will calculate by market value of equity divided by book value of equity. Now, we have to find out growth rate. So if you do some algebra here, after some algebraic manipulation, you will see, I'm going to write it down for you here. The growth rate will be this. And our next question, we have to find out the discount rate. So the discount rate will be this. And then your expected ROE will be this. So you can write this down in your formula sheet too. So let us first use this formula to answer A, because in A we have to find out the implied growth rate, which is G. So so our G so our RE is equal to discount rate, which is 9%. Our expected ROE, excuse me, 10%. I think I made a mistake. Our RE is discount rate, which is 9%. Now we are good. And then our ROE is 10%. Again, our RE discount rate 9%, and our PB ratio. So our PB ratio is our PB ratio is market value of equity, which is 59 divided by book value of equity 33. So now we have to solve for this. So 0.09 minus, so in the numerator I will have 0.01, and then in the denominator I will have 59 over 33. So which is, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to use, let's say, up to 4 decimal places, because it tells us not to round. So I'll use as much as possible. So you can also use up to 6 decimal. I think 4 decimal places will be good enough. So 1.7879. So 1.7879 and minus 1. So 0.09 minus, so it will be 0.01 divided by, so if you subtract 1 from this denominator, you will have 0.7879. 7879, which is, let's say again, use up to 4 decimals. So this. And we need to use 1 decimal place, so 7.7%. So that was our part A. So now for part B, we have to solve for, just to clarify further here. So what we did actually, we calculated the PB ratio given our market price of equity and book value of equity. So we used this number and we made some assumptions that our expectations for future ROE and our discount rate are 10% and 9%. So what we are saying that given these expectations and given these numbers, what is the growth rate? So what is the implied growth rate? If these assumptions are correct, if these numbers are correct that we used here, what is the growth rate we are implying? And one of the regions we do that, financial analysts do that, is to decide whether this implied value is reasonable or not, given the assumptions. If not, then they have to go back and make changes to some of the assumptions. Now, similarly, we have to find out the discount rate. So the formula for discount rate is this. So our expected ROE is again 10%. Our G, in this case, we're assuming 4%. And then our PB, we need to calculate 59 divided by 33. Zero 4. So now in the numerator, I will have 6%. So 0.6, and in the denominator here for PB, I will have, I think we already calculated that, 1.7879, and then plus 0.04. Now let us see if we can calculate this from here. Okay, we have to type 0.06 divided by 1.7879 plus 0.04. So 7.4%. Okay. Now, part C, so part C is expected ROE. So we have to find out future ROE. So this will be, so PB we already calculated 1.7879. And then our RE, discount rate is 9%. And then our G, 4%. So from this first subtraction, I will have 0.7879 multiplied by, from this subtraction, I will have 0.05 plus 0.04, 7.9. So I think I made a mistake somewhere. Let's see. Oh, this is RE, not the growth rate. So RE is 0.09. So let me redo this. So from this first subtraction, 0.7879 multiplied by this difference, 0.05, and then add 0.09, which is 12.9%. Okay, I'll let you guys read the chapter and solve this problem. Answer these questions, I mean. Now, question 10. So what we have to do here, assume that the present value of expected ROPI. So ROPI means residual operating income is a perpetuity. So that means it grows at a constant rate forever with growth in G. And it's telling us value is equal to amount over R minus G. R is the discount rate. Determine the theoretically correct PB ratio for each of the following companies. And we also need to know NOPAT is equal to net operating assets times the return on net operating assets. So first of all, theoretically correct PB ratio. So theoretically correct PB ratio is let me write this down here. Okay, so theoretically correct PB is equal to 1 plus present value of expected RE. So RE is the same thing as ROPI. Okay, so this is also called just RI, residual income. So present value of expected residual income divided by EQ. So EQ is equal to shareholders' equity. Okay. Shareholders' equity. So we need to find out present value of expected RI. So, and we have to divide by EQ. So we know EQ, which is the equity. Now, first we need to find out RI. So RI is equal to your NOPAT minus your net operating assets beginning and then multiplied by your weighted average cost of capital. Okay. Now, this is how we calculate RI, and then present value of expected RI will be our RI and then divided by, so what we have to do, this RW minus G, the growth rate. Okay, so we have several steps here. So let us complete these steps one at a time. So first of all, how do we calculate RI? So to calculate RI, we need to also know how to calculate NOPAT. And this problem tells us this is how to calculate NOPAT. So let us calculate NOPAT first. So NOPAT is equal to net operating assets, which is for company A. Let's say we are solving for company A. Net operating assets is equal to net NOPAT is equal to net operating assets times on return on net operating assets, which is 23%. So which will be 23. Now RI will be NOPAT, which is 23 minus net operating assets, again, which is 100 multiplied by the RW, the discount rate. This discount rate is a specific kind of discount rate, which is the weighted average cost of capital, 10%. So 23 minus 10 is equal to 13. Now present value of RI. So this will be 13 divided by, again, RW, which is 10% minus the growth rate, which is 2%. So 13 divided by 0.08. Now, what we have to do, theoretically correct PB is equal to 1 plus present value of expected RI. So let me calculate this number, 13 over 0.08. 162.5. And divided by equity, which is 100. Two decimal plus, it will be 2.63. So if you follow the same process, following the same process for company B, you can find out the answer for company B, and I'll let you guys do that too. So that is it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed this video and this is helpful. I'll see you in the next video. Take care, guys. Bye.